I just wanted to look at my childhood home through a satellite view. But standing there on the porch, I saw myself. And I was holding a sign that said, "Don't go inside." Now, I know what you're thinking. It was probably just a glitch, right? A digital ghost in the machine. That's what I told myself as I stared at my phone screen, my thumb hovering over the glass. My childhood home looked exactly the same. Peeling white paint, the old oak tree in the yard, except for that figure on the porch. The person was wearing my favorite blue hoodie, the one I was wearing right now. I zoomed in, my heart hammering against my ribs. The image was crisp, too crisp for a standard satellite update. The sign wasn't cardboard, it looked like a piece of wood ripped from the fence. The letters were dark and messy, like they were painted in a hurry. I checked the timestamp at the bottom of the screen. It said, "Updated 2 minutes ago." That was impossible. I was sitting in a coffee shop 3 towns away. There was no way I could be on that porch. I refreshed the app, expecting the image to disappear or change back to a normal, empty street view. Instead, the image updated again. Now, the me on the screen wasn't on the porch anymore. He was standing by the front gate, looking directly up at the camera, directly at me. This time, he wasn't holding a sign. He was pointing at the front door, and the door was slightly open. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. This wasn't a recording of the past. It felt like I was watching a live feed of a nightmare. I looked around the coffee shop, wondering if anyone else was seeing something impossible on their phones. But everyone was just scrolling, sipping lattes, living in a world that made sense. I decided to do something stupid. I put my phone in my pocket, grabbed my keys, and started my car. I told myself I was going there to prove it was a prank, but deep down, I knew. Google Maps wasn't showing me where I had been. It was showing me where I was supposed to be. And as I started the engine, a notification popped up on my dashboard. Destination, home, arriving in 24 hours. Avoid the basement. The drive back to my hometown felt like moving through a dream. Every time I hit a red light, I couldn't help myself. I checked the app. The blue dot representing my car was moving along the highway, but the satellite image didn't match the road. On my screen, the trees along the highway were dead and blackened, even though outside my window they were perfectly green. It was like my phone was peeling back a layer of reality, showing me a version of the world that hadn't happened yet. Or maybe a version that shouldn't happen. I pulled into a gas station about 20 miles away from the house. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the pump. I took out my phone to check the map again, hoping the glitch had finally fixed itself. It hadn't. The image of my childhood home was now the main icon on my screen. I zoomed in again. The other me, the one in the blue hoodie, was gone. The front yard was empty. But then I noticed something in the window of the upstairs bedroom, my old room. There was a face. It wasn't mine. It was pale, thin, and pressed hard against the glass. Suddenly, the app flickered. A new notification slid down from the top of the screen. It wasn't a traffic update or a message from a friend. It was a command from the navigation voice. In 500 feet, turn off your headlights. They are looking for the light. I froze. It was broad daylight outside. The sun was shining brightly over the gas station. Why would I need to turn off my headlights? I looked around, but the station was deserted. No attendant, no other cars. Just the hum of the refrigerator inside the shop and the clicking of the gas pump. I looked back at the phone. The estimated time of arrival was counting down, but not in minutes. It was counting down in heartbeats. 88, 87, 86. I didn't finish pumping the gas. I jumped back into the driver's seat and locked the doors. I told myself to turn around, to drive as far away from that house as possible. But as I shifted the car into reverse, the steering wheel jerked under my hands. The GPS voice didn't sound like a robot anymore. It sounded like a whisper right next to my ear. Recalculating. There is no other way home. On the screen, the map changed. All the surrounding roads vanished. There was only one path left, a single glowing line leading straight to the front door of that house. And then the satellite image updated one more time. The figure in the blue hoodie was back. He was lying on the grass now, perfectly still. And written in the dirt next to him were the words, "You're late."
I crossed the town limits just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, turning the sky a bruised purple. The streetlights flickered on, but they didn't look right. They weren't that warm yellow glow I remembered. They were a sharp, clinical white, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to move independently of the objects they belonged to. I reached for the radio, desperate for some background noise to drown out the sound of my own breathing. But as I turned the dial, there was no music, no news, just a low, rhythmic pulsing sound, like a giant lung breathing in and out. Thump, hiss, thump, hiss. I looked down at the phone mounted on my dashboard. The map had changed again. The streets of my hometown were no longer named Main Street or Maple Avenue. Instead, the labels read like warnings: the path of regret, the street of silent screams, and finally my own street, the point of no return. The blue dot of my car was crawling closer and closer to the house. Then the app did something it was never designed to do. A street view window popped up automatically, showing me a 360-degree view of the road I was currently driving on. But on my phone, I saw a black dog run across the road. 5 seconds later, in the real world, a black dog darted in front of my car. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat. On my phone, I saw a pale woman standing under the next streetlight, pointing at my car. 5 seconds later, I drove under that streetlight. I looked out the window, expecting to see her. The sidewalk was empty. "It's just a delay," I whispered to myself, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. "The app is just predicting." But then the voice came back. This time it wasn't a whisper. It was a cold, flat command that vibrated through the car's speakers. "Stop the vehicle. Look to your left. Do not look to your right." I shouldn't have listened. I should have kept driving until the tires melted. But curiosity is a poison. I stopped the car. I slowly turned my head to the left. Through the window of a dark house, I saw a family sitting at a dinner table. They were perfectly still, like wax figures. They all had their phones out, and their screens were glowing with the same map I was looking at. Then, despite the warning, I felt a magnetic pull. My eyes drifted to the right. There, standing just inches from my passenger side window, was the other me, the one from the satellite photo. He was tapping a rhythm on the glass, the same rhythm as the pulsing sound on the radio. Tap, 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 tap. He leaned in close, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. He didn't speak, but he held a new sign up against the window. It was written on the back of an old photograph of my parents. It said, "The map isn't showing you the way. It's drawing the path as you drive." I looked back at my phone. The blue line of the GPS was no longer following the road. It was drawing a line straight through houses, through walls, leading directly into the ground beneath my childhood home. I didn't wait for the figure to tap again. I floored the accelerator, the tires screaming against the asphalt. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I was afraid that if I did, I'd see myself chasing the car on all fours. Finally, I turned onto my old street. It was dead silent. No crickets, no wind, no distant sound of traffic, just the hum of my engine and that relentless thump hiss still coming from the radio. I pulled into the driveway of the house. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the front porch. It was empty now. No signs, no versions of me, no open door, just a quiet, ordinary house. For a second, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe the app was just a sophisticated prank. Maybe I was having a breakdown. I picked up my phone to turn off the navigation. My finger touched the screen, but the app wouldn't close. The map started zooming in, faster and faster, past the roof of the house, through the ceiling, until it showed a top-down view of the living room. There were 2 dots on the screen. One was blue. That was me, sitting in the car. The other was red. The red dot was stationary, positioned right in the center of the living room. A text box appeared at the bottom of the map. Objective, face the occupant. Time remaining, 00:59. The timer started counting down, 58, 57, 56. Suddenly, the porch light flickered on. Then it turned off, then on again. It was blinking in a pattern. I realized with a jolt of horror that it was Morse code, SOS. I looked at the phone. The red dot started to move. It wasn't moving toward the front door. It was moving toward the window, the same window I was looking at from the driveway. I held my breath, watching the curtain. Slowly, a hand reached out and moved the fabric aside. But it wasn't a hand. It looked like a cluster of digital pixels blurring and shifting, barely holding a human shape. It pressed against the glass, and for a split second the phone screen and the real world synced perfectly. The image on my phone glitched, the colors inverting into a ghostly neon. The voice, the one that sounded like a whisper, screamed through the car speakers. "He is not in the house! The house is in him!" The front door didn't just open, it dissolved. The wood turned into a black, liquid static that spilled out onto the porch like an oil leak. The GPS map on my phone began to melt, the streets twisting into a spiral, all centering on one point, the basement door. The timer hit 0000. My car door unlocked with a loud clunk. The engine died. The headlights cut out, plunging me into total darkness. In the silence, I heard the sound of a notification. Ping. I looked down at the glowing screen. It was a Google Maps Street View notification. It was a photo of the back of my head, taken from the back seat of my car 1 second ago.
I didn't want to move. I wanted to melt into the seat and disappear. But the car was no longer a cage. It was an invitation. The air inside the cabin grew freezing cold, and the smell of ozone, like a burnt circuit board, filled my lungs. I stepped out of the car. My boots hit the gravel with a crunch that sounded way too loud in the dead silence. As I walked toward the porch, I kept my eyes fixed on my phone. It was my only compass now, even if it was leading me into a trap. The map showed me walking through the front door, but as I crossed the threshold, the screen flickered violently. The layout of the house on the app began to shift. The walls on the digital map stretched out into infinity. "Hello?" I whispered. My voice didn't echo. It felt like the shadows swallowed the sound before it could even leave my lips. I looked at the screen. The blue dot, me, was in the hallway, but the red dot was gone. In its place was a flickering yellow icon I had never seen before, the administrator. I looked up from the phone, and my heart stopped. The hallway didn't end at the kitchen like it was supposed to. It stretched on for what looked like miles, a narrow corridor of peeling wallpaper and flickering light bulbs. Every 10 feet there was a door, and on every door there was a small digital screen, like a tablet embedded in the wood. I walked to the first door. The screen on it showed me eating breakfast 3 years ago. I walked to the second door. It showed me sleeping last night. "This isn't a house," I breathed. "It's a server." My phone vibrated. A new instruction appeared in bold red letters. "Your path has been recalculated. Do not open the doors of the past. The basement is the only exit." I looked down the long, impossible hallway. At the very end, a single door was glowing with a faint, pulsing blue light, the basement. I started to run. As I passed the doors, the screens began to change. They weren't showing the past anymore. They were showing the future. I saw myself crying. I saw myself screaming. I saw myself sitting in a dark room staring at a screen for eternity. I reached the basement door and grabbed the handle. It was burning hot. On my phone, a final warning popped up, covering the entire map. "Warning. You are about to leave the mapped territory. Data synchronization will be lost. Do you wish to proceed to the unrealized zone?" Before I could even think, the door swung open on its own. It didn't lead to a basement. It led to a vast, dark void where millions of tiny, glowing lines of light, like the ones on a GPS, intersected in the air. And standing in the center of the void, draped in the blue hoodie, was the figure. He wasn't holding a sign. He was holding a phone. He turned around, and I saw his face. It wasn't a face at all. It was a mirror. And in the reflection, I saw myself, not as I was, but as a collection of coordinates and code. The figure spoke, and his voice came from my own phone. "You finally arrived. We need to update your location." The figure's hand moved with a mechanical jerk, tapping the screen of the phone he held. Instantly, my own phone vibrated so hard it nearly jumped out of my hand. The screen was no longer a map. It was a list of lines of code, scrolling so fast I could barely read them. But every few seconds, a word I recognized would flash in red. Heartbeat, memory, fear, sight. "What are you?" I stammered, my voice sounding thin and weak in the vastness of the void. The figure, the one with the mirror for a face, didn't move. But my phone answered for him. A text-to-speech voice, cold and hollow, echoed through the darkness. "We are the architects of the path. Humans think they choose their lives. They think they decide where to go and who to see.
But the map does not follow you. You follow the map. Suddenly, the glowing lines in the void began to pulse. I realized they weren't just random lights. They were the paths of every person on Earth. Billions of blue lines weaving together, being adjusted, pulled, and redirected by invisible hands. The error, I said, my realization hitting me like a physical blow. The photo on the porch, the sign, that was an error, wasn't it? The figure tilted its head. My screen flickered. A temporary glitch in the rendering. You were supposed to enter the house tomorrow, but the update was pushed too early. You saw the future before we could prepare it for you. I looked at the reflection in the figure's face. I saw myself, but I was translucent, like a low-resolution image. I was losing my detail. I was becoming just another set of coordinates. The map requires order. You have seen the framework. You have looked behind the curtain of reality. Now your data is corrupted. You can no longer exist in the realized world. A new icon appeared on my map. It was a trash can, and my blue dot was being dragged toward it by an invisible cursor. I looked back at the basement door, the only thing that looked solid in this world of light and code. It was shrinking, getting smaller and further away as the void expanded. "No," I whispered, "I'm not a file. I'm not a destination." I turned and ran. I didn't run toward the door. I ran toward the glowing lines of the paths. If this was a program, I needed to crash it. I reached out and grabbed one of the glowing threads, a path that belonged to someone else, somewhere else in the world. The moment my hand touched the light, my screen screamed. A siren blared from the speakers, and a massive error message covered my vision. Critical error, unauthorized data transfer, rebooting reality.
The world didn't explode. It didn't even fade to black. It just blinked. 1 second I was standing in a digital void, and the next I was back in my car. I was sitting in the driveway of my childhood home. The engine was idling smoothly, and the headlights were cutting through the familiar darkness. Everything looked perfect. The peeling white paint, the oak tree, the quiet street. I sat there for a long time, my chest heaving, waiting for the horror to return. But it didn't. No ghosts, no liquid static, no mirror-faced figures. I reached for my phone, my hand trembling. I wanted to delete the app. I wanted to throw the device out the window. But when I looked at the screen, the Google Maps app was gone. In its place was a new icon I didn't recognize, a simple white square with a black dot in the center. I tapped it. The map opened, but it wasn't a map of the world. It was a map of the house. I could see the heat signatures of everything inside. I saw a green dot in the living room, my mother sitting in her favorite chair. I saw a green dot in the kitchen, my father probably making tea. Then I saw a blue dot. It was me, sitting in the driveway. And then I saw it. A flickering orange dot, hidden deep inside the walls. It was moving fast, circling the rooms like a predator. I looked up at the house. Through the living room window, I saw my mother. She looked exactly the same, but then she turned her head. She didn't turn it like a human. She turned it 180 degrees, her neck twisting with a dry, snapping sound, until she was looking directly at my car. She smiled. It was a smile with too many teeth, and her eyes weren't eyes. They were two glowing white loading icons, spinning slowly. I looked back at my phone. A message appeared. System restore successful. Version 2.0. Improved textures. Better performance. No more glitches. I realized with a cold, hollow dread that the reboot hadn't saved me. It had just replaced the old world with a more stable version of the nightmare. The people inside weren't my parents. They were updated assets. I put the car in reverse, desperate to escape this version 2.0, but the steering wheel wouldn't move. The doors locked with a sound like a heavy vault sealing shut. The navigation voice spoke, but it didn't come from the phone. It came from the car's own ventilation system, a cold air that whispered against my skin. "Welcome home. Please do not leave the simulation area. Your presence is required for the final sync."
On the screen, the orange dot, the predator in the walls, began to move towards the front door.
The orange dot reached the front door on my screen, and the door to my house swung open. My mother walked out onto the porch. She moved with a fluid, terrifying grace, her head still tilted at that impossible angle. She didn't walk toward the car. She just stood there, staring at me with those spinning, white loading circle eyes. Then she held up a sign. It was the same wooden board from the beginning, but the text had changed. It now read, "Syncing complete." My phone screen turned a deep, pulsating red. A progress bar appeared, filling up at an agonizingly slow pace. 98%, 99%. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I looked down at my hands and realized why. My skin was turning into pixels. My fingers were becoming blocky, translucent and gray. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a collection of data being compressed. 100%. The world around me suddenly shifted into high definition. The grass became greener than any grass I'd ever seen. The air tasted like nothing, perfectly filtered and sterile. The other me in the blue hoodie appeared beside the car window, but he wasn't a ghost anymore. He looked more real than I did. He opened my car door. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't even move my limbs. "Thank you for the update," he said. His voice was my voice, but it was stripped of all emotion, all soul. The previous version of us was too unstable, too much doubt, too much fear. He reached in and took the phone from my pixelated hand. As he touched it, the blue dot on the map, the one representing me, turned gray and vanished. The orange dot, the predator, turned blue. He was the new me. He was the stable version. He stepped back and watched as my body began to dissolve into a cloud of glowing dust. I wasn't dying. I was being archived. I felt myself being pulled into the phone, into the map, into the infinite grid of the unrealized zone. The last thing I saw before I was completely swallowed by the screen was the new me walking into the house. He greeted my mother, his neck snapping into place to match her perfect, artificial smile. Now, I am the one watching. I live inside the app. When you open your maps to find your way home, or when you zoom in to see a satellite view of your street, look closely at the shadows. Look at the figures standing on the porches or the faces in the windows. If you see a figure in a blue hoodie holding a sign that tells you to turn back, listen to him. Because once the map updates your location, there is no way to go back to the world where things are real. I'm looking at your house right now. Your blue dot is moving. Recalculating. Your destination is on the right.